Hello to everyone and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Tanner Swift and I'll be your moderator for this session. I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Jakub Horbacewicz, but before I hand the mic over to our presenter, I do have a few housekeeping items to cover about this presentation. Today's webinar will be recorded and made available on demand after the live session. We will provide you with some of those details near the end. The session is also being live streamed on the Cisco U Learning and Certifications YouTube page, so the playback will be available to you at any time. We'd love to hear from you during today's presentation. During the session, if you are here with us on WebEx and have any questions for our presenter, please submit them through the Q&A panel where our wonderful panelists are ready to respond, and we will also have a Q&A portion near the end of the session. If you experience any audio issues during today's session, I will share the callback number and the webinar access code with you in the chat momentarily. So without further ado, I'd like to kick things off by welcoming Jakub. Jakub, right over to you.
Thank you, Tanner. Share the screen. Alrighty. So, hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining us. Welcome to the CCIE Data Center roadmap with the focus on the new version coming, which is version 3.1. So my name is Jakub Horbacewicz, and as the CCIE Data Center Exam Program Manager, I will be presenting today's session. All right, so let's dive right in and let's take a look on what topics we are going to cover today. So first, I will clarify the differences between the major and minor exams revisions. Next, very quickly, we'll get to know the exam format and what's the scoring methodology. And finally, I'm gonna walk you through the updates to the hardware, software, and to the blueprint changes of version 3.1 comparing to the current version, which is 3.0. And here it is, how these topics are lined up in the agenda structure. So first, we are going to have some program updates around CCIE. Then we are going to move on to the CCIE DC process and format. Then we are going to cover these changes in the data center version 3.1. Last but not least, we are going to discuss some resources available to you for study materials and repository links. And as a bonus, we are gonna have Cisco Press voucher for the attendees of today's webinar. All right, so let's get started with some overall updates about the CCIE program and then move on to the latest news dedicated specifically to the CCIE Data Center. First, I'm going to explain the concept of the certification roadmap. And honestly, I need to take a moment to drink my tea. So, I can concentrate because this can be confusing if you don't work for Cisco. So I think some of you agree that sometimes we make simple things more complicated than they need to be. And my personal view is that this is a good example of it. So each Cisco exam, including the ones for the data center, which are color-coded as blue in this slide, each exam goes through several stages of so-called development lifecycle, all right? So this includes a review stage, an announcement stage before the exam goes live. And we try to group these exams into categories such as data center, and we move through these stages on a specific schedule, okay? So our goal is to make candidates aware that the new version of a data center exam will come out in the third quarter of every year, okay? But here's the tricky part. At Cisco, we don't follow the regular calendar year. Instead, we use a fiscal year, which is different, right? This means that Q1 is from August to October, Q2 is November to January, Q3 February to April, Q4 May to July. Now, another aspect that you need to take into consideration is that CCIE exams, including obviously the CCIE Data Center, don't necessarily stick to this timeline. We try to do so, but it's not always possible, especially for the exams, practical exams like CCIE. So The question is, why am I showing it to you, right? So keep that in mind, that in order to attempt the CCIE exam, you need to pass something which we call qualifying exam. And for the data center track, this is the DC core exam. And DC core falls into this life cycle that I'm showing currently. Okay. Good. So now let's evaluate the timelines for the CCIE Data Center version 3.1. Let me use the laser pointer over here. Okay, there you go. So for the sake of the explanation, I'm actually going to skip this left part, so this review stage, right? Because this is something which is totally, completely transparent to the candidate. It's fully internal process, so there is no need to discuss that. Let's move on to this announce stage. So we announced the new version of the CCIE back in October last year. And based on that date, a release date is calculated. And how's that? There's one guideline which I think is pretty fair to candidates, which says that after the exam announcement, after the CCIE exam announcements, the current exam version is active for yet next 6 months, which brings us to the April. And to be very specific, it brings us to the April 20th. And because the April 20th is Saturday, so the testing centers are closed, we are starting to test candidates from this new version starting from Monday, so in reality from April 22nd. Okay. Another aspect I want to touch on is up until when the candidates can take the current version of CCIE DC version 3.0. And the answer is this version, so version 3.0, is active all the way up until April 12th, right? And now you may wonder, okay, so what's about the dates between 12th and 22nd of April? For one working week, so for 5 days, the entire CC data center track is going to be shut down, right? So this week is actually taken out from the booking system for the CCIE DC exams. So this is because we need to make necessary modifications, we need to make necessary changes and upgrades in the delivery pods in our testing locations to support the new version of the exam, right? That's why in reality, the current version, so the version 3.0, runs until 12th of April, and starting from April 22nd, only the new version is going to be available for the candidates. And note that there is no interim period where these two versions are available at the same time. Either it's version 3.0 until the April 12th, or it's 3.1 starting from April 22nd. And now, so far, I have mentioned version 3.0, 3.1 a couple of times, right? But what's that numbering about? So in CCIE program, in general, we have something which we call a revision framework. And this is pretty simple to explain. So we either have the major revisions like 1.0, 3.2.0, 3.0, when we change the first number, or we have the minor revisions where we change the second number. So 3.1, 3.2, so on and so forth. So in theory, major revisions are being done every 3 to 5 years, whilst the minor revisions could be done more frequently, right? So in the minor revisions, we have definitely smaller changes. So when you compare this exam topics changes, there is a change rate below 20% comparing to above 20% when it comes to the major revisions, right? In the minor revisions, as you see, we don't have any hardware changes, but we are focusing on the software and topology changes. In the major revision, however, we have the full package, meaning hardware, software, and topology changes at the same time. Okay. So basically, these minor revisions will provide us with agility and with the speed that are necessary to adjust our exams to match the to match industry standards, to match industry changes, without actually the need of rebuilding everything from the very scratch. Okay. So now, when you hear the change of the CCIE data center from 3.0 to 3.1, you clearly see that currently the exam is going through the minor revision, right? So we're trying to ensure our exam stays relevant, but with minimum possible changes. Okay, so we went over the revision framework. Now let's talk about how you can get your CCIE Data Center certification, and let's go over how the lab exam looks like. So the question is how CCIE Data Center certification process for version 3.1 looks like. And first, short answer is the process is exactly the same as it is today. The detailed answer, however, is that in order to get your CCIE Data Center certification, you first need to pass qualifying exam, which is the DC Core exam 350-601, which is implementing and operating Cisco Data Center core technologies. All right? This exam replaces the older written exam that used to be a part of the CCIE certification in the past. So you can take this DC Core exam at any Pearson VUE location and any Pearson VUE testing center. And I believe right now there is also an option to do it from home in the dedicated secure environment that you are downloading from Pearson. What else? The exam itself is 2 hours. It has between 90 and 110 questions. And obviously you are going to be scored immediately, right? Additional thing worth to mention is, unlike the lab exam, this is strictly a written test where you will be selecting answers from the possible choices, right? Or maybe doing some bits of the configuration, but only in the simulate, so in the simulates questions, simulator-based questions. When you think about the DC Core, you know, it is similar format to what you might have experienced in other Cisco associate and professional levels exam. Okay. And by the way, additional point which is worth to mention is that actually DC Core is the exam which is required to pass if you think about the CCNP certification as well. Now, what to do next? After you pass the DC Core exam, within 3 years of its validity, you need to take CCIE Data Center version 3.1 lab exam. And this lab exam can be taken at any Cisco global testing location, which includes 8 locations. So we have Brussels, Dubai, Richardson, Bangalore, Beijing, Tokyo, Sydney, and Singapore. And there is no DC exam dependency on those locations, meaning that you can take CCIE Data Center in each of these testing centers. Okay. Version 3.1 exam is 8 hours exam that consists of 2 modules. So the first module is called design module, and it has a limit of 3 hours. And the second module is called deploy, operate, optimize, and it has a limit of 5 hours. So 3 plus 5 equals 8 hours combined. As well as during other CCIE exams, you have an access to the Cisco documentation during the exam, and you are not scored automatically. You will get the score of your exam within 48 hours, right? Now, let me focus a bit more on the exam format summary. So the bottom line here is that the format doesn't change between version 3.0 and 3.1. So the candidate is given 2 modules. Module 1, which is called design, very often referred to as DES module, and module 2, which is called deploy, operate, optimize, which is very often referred to as do module. And these modules are graded independently, and in order to pass the entire exam, you'll need to pass both of them, all right? And now, even though these 2 parts of the exam might seem completely separate and independent, there is one thing which glue them together, and this is actually a storyline, all right? So during the exam, you will be presented with a scenario or couple of scenarios involving a made-up company, okay? And in the first module, module number 1, we will work through design considerations for this company network, design choices for this company for this company, and then in the second module, in the do module, you will move on to the actual deployment of that network. All right. And keep in mind, this is, I think, worth to point out that there is no strict dependency between the design considerations and design choices that you did in the module 1 with the module 2. So your answers and choices in DES are not necessarily reflected in module 2 in the do module. Okay? Keep that in mind. Now, let's quickly talk about the setup for the data center lab exam. So every candidate, regardless of the testing center, gets 2 monitors, gets an US-style keyboard and a mouse, right? And as shown in this example, the whole exam is accessible through kind of a web-based interface, all right? In this web-based frontend, you can see the network topology, you can see all the necessary resources, so the questions, so the emails which are relevant to these resources, and the session to your devices, right? So the way we deliver the exam hasn't changed from the version 3.0 to 3.1. Now, additionally to this exam frontend in the DC exam, the candidate is also given an access to something which is called Test PC, which is essentially a Windows virtual machine. All right. When you log in to this Test PC, you have the web browser to access all graphical user interfaces you will need to. And additionally, this Test PC comes with the multi-tabbed PuTTY, so empty PuTTY installed. And in this mPuTTY, you actually have all the sessions for all the devices already pre-saved. Okay, so keep that in mind as well. Obviously, there is an option in the exam frontend to have access to the devices as well, but come on, you know, realistically speaking, you don't want to configure devices through the web interface. After all, you know, this is the CCIE exam, so you should do it in the right way. So you should use PuTTY for the device configuration. Good. Now, just a couple of words about scoring and scoring methodology. To pass the entire exam, the candidate needs to pass each individual module with at least minimum score. Okay? But this is not enough. The candidate needs to achieve an aggregated score which is higher than the pass score for the entire exam. That's why each module has additional value of the pass score assigned to it. Right? This means that if the candidate achieves the pass score from module 1 and module 2, he or she will pass the exam for sure. But if the candidate doesn't reach a pass score from one module, he or she can potentially make up the result by scoring above the pass score of the second module. Okay, so still the aggregated passing score is going to be achieved. It might be the situation, however, when the candidate passed each module, but his aggregated score was lower than the passing score of the entire exam, right? So for example, the candidate only achieved minimum from module number 1 and minimum for module number 2. In that way, he or she would fail the exam. I'm not going to go into details of that scoring. This is exactly the same methodology that we used in the past and that we are using across all other CCIE tracks. Okay. All right, so it's time to focus on the main part of our webinar today. So we are going to talk about what's new in the CCIE Data Center exam version 3.1. But before comparing the current and the future blueprint, let's first address the question, where can you get everything you need to know about CCIE Data Center version 3.1? And the answer is straightforward. Head over to Cisco Learning Network. So let me very quickly show you how to navigate this site to find the information you would like to get. So let me bring up the browser. So this is the Google browser. Let me put CCIE Data Center in it. and let me use the first link, which actually redirects me to the landing page of the CCIE Data Center certification training. As you see, we have very nicely done banner for today's event. But when I scroll down, actually, this is something that we already discussed, right? So I have the process of obtaining the CCIE Data Center certification lined up. First step is passing the qualifying exam, which we discussed, and the second step is passing the lab exam. Let me click on this CCIE Data Center version 3.0. Now I'm going to be redirected to the exam topics of this lab exam, right? But over here, when we have the banner of the roadmap event, we have another banner that there are some data center exam updates. When I click on the button with the Learn More label on it, I'm going to be redirected to yet another page, which is related to Cisco certification roadmaps. So this is something that I showed you on the first slide, right? And when I scroll down, I have data center already selected. And I have also the information relevant to CCIE lab exam updates, right? So from here, I can get the release notes, I can get the exam topics, I can get the learning matrix, and also the new hardware and software list. Everything is available over here. Okay, so keep that in mind. And by the way, I showed you only one workflow of accessing these resources. Obviously, there are many links and many ways of accessing the exact same resources that I'm showing right now. Okay, cool. So let me go to the presentation. Now, let's talk about the equipment we will use for version 3.1 of the exam. And by the way, on this slide and on the slides that are coming up, I've proposed the following convention. So the left part of the slide shows the current version of the exam, and the right part of the slide shows what's new for version 3.1. Okay, so this convention is consistent across slides that are coming up. And now I'm talking about some hardware equipment changes. And you may remember from LReal that I said there shouldn't be any hardware changes in the minor revision, right? That's mostly right. That's partially true. So you shouldn't see any new items. But when it comes to removing things, it's a bit different story, right? So we have removed actually HyperFlex because it's no longer part of the exam topics as well. You will see that in a sec. And additionally, we removed Nexus 2 case as, you know, for multiple reasons, the use of FEXes has significantly decreased. Okay. The rest of the equipment is the same as it was for version 3.0. It means that we still have Nexus 5 case, we still have Nexus 7 case, UCSB, and other not latest and greatest hardware, right? The big update on the hardware will come with the major revision, okay? Now, yeah, that's it from the equipment list perspective. Now, let's look at the software updates, which is where you see the most changes actually, right? So on the left side, you see that we've removed several software solutions such as Cisco DCNM, which has been rebranded as Nexus Dashboard Fabric Controller, which is added in this form to the software list on the right. We removed UCS Director as it's end of life couple of years now. We removed HyperFlex, which had its end of life announced last year. And we removed multi-site software version 2.x, which has been rebranded to the Nexus Dashboard Orchestrator and updated to version 4.x and included into the version 3.1 blueprint. For the existing hardware devices, as you see, we are upgrading the NXOS to version 10.x when it comes to standalone Nexus 9K switches. The ACI version is also getting an update from the version 4.x to 5.x to include some and to support some new features listed in the exam topics. And besides, you will see right now the Nexus dashboard with the 3 services: Orchestrator, Fabric Controller, and Insights. Right? The Nexus dashboard itself is in the version 3.x, which means that this is already the refreshed product with a new user interface that is consistent across all the services running on top. So across Orchestrator, Fabric Controller, and Insights, right? And because it's 3.x, it also gives you a clue about the minimum versions of NDO, NDFC, and NDI, right? Because you need to have them compatible with Nexus Dashboard 3.x. So the only thing you need to do is you should go to the Nexus Dashboard and Services Compatibility Matrix and to check this versioning on your own. Okay, good. This is about the software. Now, what about the actual exam topics, also called blueprint? In this minor revision, all the main domains, all the main areas, and the percentage which is associated with the area remain the same. Of course, to keep the exam current, we've introduced some new tasks to the blueprint. Some tasks have been removed, some tasks have been modified. Okay, but the overall structure stay as is, because this is also the guideline, this is the mandate for the minor revision change. So let's dive in and start with the data center L2, L3 connectivity. So this is, all about knowing how to set up and work with layer 2 and layer 3 technologies in the data center. This means that we'll be covering, as previously, everything starting from the port channels through routing protocols to multicast, right? And there is just a tiny change over here. So we've added the local AS feature to the BGP section because it wasn't explicitly mentioned before. So this is the feature that lets a BGP router to act like it is a part of a different autonomous system for certain neighbors, right? And that's domain 1. As you see, not a lot of updates over here, right? Good. Next, moving on to the data center fabric infrastructure. So here in this domain, we dig into many different fabric components, including APIC, including NDFC controllers. We are talking about spine and leaf architecture and the policy configuration with the focus on Cisco ACI. And over here, as you see in physical fabric components, so to that one, we brought in something which is called multi-tier architecture. And we've also made some topics more clear and more detailed. So we are a little bit more verbose when it comes to the data center fabric infrastructure section, right? So for example, now we are calling out certain concepts by its name. So for example, here in the overall policies, you see tenants, application profile, EPGs, and also you see ESGs, so endpoint security groups, which are now part of the blueprint. Same examples for the security, for example, where the VZN comparing to the 3.0 is right now called out, explicitly mentioned in the blueprint. So that's it when it comes to the data center fabric infrastructure. Moving on to domain number 3, which is data center fabric connectivity. So this domain is all about how to create and how to manage connections within and between data center networks. So when you look at the updated exam blueprint, excuse me, you'll notice that right now it could ask about 2 different types of overlay technologies, ACI and the VXLAN EVPN. So they are like equally treated, right? And most of the smaller tasks over here in this section are applicable for both, for ACI and for VXLAN EVPN, unless it is specifically mentioned otherwise. So for example, in 3.3, so interfabric connectivity, you see that multi-site is relevant for both ACI and the VXLAN EVPN, But the multipod is just ACI multipod, even though you can have the multipod design setup in the VXLAN EVPN environment too. Okay. What else? What else is new? We actually rephrased, excuse me, rephrased the term of L3 out because it is specific to ACI, and we changed it to the external connectivity, which is applicable to both overlay technologies. Okay, so it's, let's say, overlay agnostic right now. Good. Now, moving on to DC compute. So let's briefly tackle it right now. DC compute, so domain where you learn and do stuff related to hardware and software for computing in data centers, how to set them up and how to keep them running, basically, right? And as you see, this section has been slightly changed as well. So hyperflex have been removed completely because it was announced to reach its end of life September last year. And it's been replaced with Nutanix. So Cisco converged compute with Nutanix, right? You can also find that right now Intersite has been added alongside to the UCS manager. And to be honest, Intersite was actually part of the version 3.0 exam, but it has been moved from section 7 to section 4 over here. And that's all about the data center compute. Section number 5. So data center storage protocols and features, all about understanding configuration and potentially troubleshooting various storage networking protocols and technologies. So here, what we decided to do is we decided to take out tasks which are related to iSCSI, and instead, we are focusing more on Rocky V2 to address the growing popularity of the artificial intelligence machine learning clusters located in the data centers, right? That means that all the quality of service mechanisms for congestion control when it comes to Rocky V2 and when it comes to networks which are prepared for the AI ML workloads, all of these have been added into this domain as well. And then there is section number 6, data center security and network services. We've made a small change for clarity only, I would say. So we expanded the span tasks to explicitly mention span, remote span, and encapsulated remote span. Okay, this is the only change that we did over here. And last but not least, section 7, which covers DC automation and orchestration. So this is the part where you learn about automation tools, scripting or coding languages to make managing and running data centers operations easier and more efficient. Okay, so starting from the left, DCNM per se was not removed. It just changed the name to the NDFC, and it's included in the exam with its new form, right? UCS director and its related tasks are completely gone. Intersite has been moved from this section to compute section, so section number 4. And Cloud Center Suite has been completely removed because it's end of life too. And what's new? Well, next to the Python and Ansible, we added also the Terraform, so the tool for setting up infrastructure as code. And I think the most significant update when it comes to the whole exam in version 3.1 is the Nexus dashboard being introduced with its 3 services. So orchestrator, single point of provisioning and managing multi-site infrastructure, fabric controller, management and control of the NXOS-based fabrics, and insights. So day-to operation tools used for ACI and for the NXOS-based fabrics used for monitoring, with troubleshooting, with these proactive aspects built in. And additionally, there's the Cloud Network Controller, so CNC added, which is the former Cloud APIC, CAPIC, whatever you call it. We added it as the way to extend the ACI policies to the cloud infrastructures. Okay, so that's the part of the blueprint as well. Good. Now, quick overview of some helpful resources for studying for CCIE Data Center version 3.1. How do I start? I would say start with the official learning matrix, which is released alongside this exam blueprint, release notes, and the hardware and software release. In this matrix, each exam task is mapped to the specific resource, and this resource is either Cisco documentation or Cisco Pressbook or some session from the Cisco Live, right? And by the way, the on-demand library from Cisco Live itself is yet another independent and valuable resource for CCIE data center preparation. In the Cisco Learning Network, we offer training videos dedicated to CCIE data center as well. They haven't been updated to version 3.1, but most of them are still relevant. So specifically, there is a video about building your own lab. It's a broad topic. I'm not going to go into details of it, but just referring to it that something like this does exist. Excuse me. Another resource which complements previously discussed is our Cisco U. So for those who are not familiar with the concept, Cisco U is a digital learning platform where you can take full courses or so-called learning paths or quick courses focused on the very specific technical aspect, right? So for example, all CCNP level data center trainings are available at Cisco U. Also, there is a new training called Cisco DC Nexus Dashboard Essentials, which got released December last year, so it's pretty new. That's why I put this new icon next to it. And as you see, when it comes to the individual courses, the numbers are quite impressive when it comes to the data center related materials, right? And by the way, it's worth to mention that some of these courses do include built-in labs as well. Okay. Here you will find important links as well, such as link to the partner interactive webinars. If you are working for a partner, this is an excellent source of information and study materials. These sessions in majority are BU delivered, and they touch on multiple aspects of the data center. If you are not a partner, don't worry. Most of these PAW sessions are duplicated and delivered to customers as well. So there is a site which is called Cloud Webinars and Demos. These sessions are also delivered by the same BU team as the PAWs, the same great speakers. Encourage you to follow. Cisco dCloud, something that you have an access to as the Cisco partner. If you are working as the customer, work with your account team to get an access. There is also my Twitter or X account, where I share tweets related to the CCIE data center exams, specifically focusing on some webinars, on some tips for candidates. Rest assured, there is no spam or influencer-like content over there. No worries. And as a bonus for our session participants today, we have an offer. There is a new CCNP and CCIE Data Center Core official certification guide that has been released last December, hot off the press. So you can get 40% off with the discount of the code DC Prep. DC Prep. So keep in mind that this code is active until the end of February. So you still have 2 or 3 days to consider this opportunity. Okay, good. So DC Prep. All right. Yeah, that's it. That's it from my side. Now I think we can move to the Q&A.
Absolutely. Going to take the time to do that just now. Really appreciate it, Jacob. Just as a reminder for all of our attendees, if you do have a question, using the Q&A panel is best. So we'll get to some questions right now, starting with this one from Christian. If I have the CCNP data center, I passed that years ago, do I need to pass the core exam to take the CCIE data center lab exam?
Yeah, so actually you need to have the valid DC core exam to attempt the CCIE data center right now. So if you pass this CCNP like a year ago or maybe 2 years ago, most probably this DC core is still has its validity. If not, you need to attempt DC core as the prerequisite for taking the CCIE lab exam.
Perfect, thank you. This next question from from Brenda says, I've cleared the written exam, but not getting any available slot before April 19th, 2024. In case if I am not able to attend the lab prior to the version change, do I need to clear the written exam for CCIE Data Center v3.1?
No, these two things are independent from each other, meaning that within the validity of the DC core, you can take either data center version 3.0 before April 22nd, or you can take CCIE data center lab exam version 3.1 after April 22nd. So the DC core version has not affect the DC lab exam that you can attempt. It's only about the validity, which is 3 years validity after the passing the qualifying exam, which is the DC core.
Great, thank you. Another question here, and then I'm going to kick it to Matt for a couple as well. Can you please shed more light on what documentation is available during the lab exam? Is there a summary link leading to it?
Yeah, how this is work exactly, I'm not able to answer right now, so I would need to double check how we are doing it. But this is my I think valid guess that you need to browse from the cisco.com page directly to the specific documentation. You cannot search for it using Google or whatever. You need to go to the documentation page, you need to go to the specific product and to the documentation of the specific product to get the documentation that you would like to check, right? So it's also the matter of knowing how to navigate in the cisco.com page rather than jumping to the documentation straight or directly from the Google search results.
Great, thank you. Matt, I'll kick it to you for a couple questions.
Thank you, Tanner. Hey, Jacob. Let's see here. So we've got a couple of questions. I want to start with a couple of questions specifically on Nutanix. Hope I'm saying Nutanix correctly. Somebody can correct me later if I'm not.
That's good.
Thank you. So the great Brian McGannon is here with us, and he wants to know. So let's see. And that Nutanix is now listed as a part of the 3.1 exam blueprint. Since Nutanix is not listed on the DC 3.1, the CCIE DC 3.1 equipment and software list, is the scope of what's covered for Nutanix currently just for the design portion of the exam?
Yeah, so thanks, Brian, for this question. This is a very valid observation. I haven't called out this directly, but it is exactly as you said. The Nutanix is a part of the blueprint, but you don't find any software and the hardware related to the Nutanix on the software and equipment list, which means that obviously there is no way you can expect this in the module number 2. So in the do module, but yes, the Nutanix is going to be a part and is going to be included into module number 1, which is the design module. Indeed, that's a valid observation, and that's the valid way of thinking.
Awesome. Thank you, Jacob. And then I'll also just let Brian know that no, we will not be taking your bait to comment on the recent acquisitions of external third-party companies, but thank you for asking. Uh, Jacob, Brian tried to bait us into commenting on an acquisition that we won't comment on. Let's see. And then Raphael also asked, is there a path to look at what's the minimum requirement for Nutanix? Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what is necessarily meant there, Jacob, but does that question, does that work for you?
Not, I'm not sure. I think it's the question about the the question is about the scope of
Yeah.
the Nutanix that can be, let's say, touch on the DES module. I don't remember currently what is the link posted in the learning matrix when it comes to the Nutanix, but I will make sure, if it's not a valid link, or maybe it's a too broad, I will make sure to post a specific resource dedicated to the Nutanix, from which you can expect to be tested on. Obviously, this is a broad topic, but yeah, I will try to, let's say, narrow it down to the specific resource in the learning matrix.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you, Jacob. Yeah, and so Raphael, we'll have a post-event discussion thread over on the Cisco Learning Network as well. So we can do a little further follow-up on that topic with you, Raphael, over on that discussion thread, if that works for you. And we'll share a link. Well, Tanner just shared a link to that. Thank you, Tanner, in the chat, but we'll also share a link to that in our post-event thank you for attending email, along with how to access the recording, etc. Okay, Jacob. And then, so a common question, right, is about when we go from one version of our exams and we make a minor version iteration and upgrade to the next minor version, so the .1 release. And folks always want to know, you know, if I prepared for 3.0 and we switch the exam over to 3.1, how prepared am I for the exam at that point? Do I need to, this is a little bit of exaggerating a little bit, but do I need to go and start from scratch? So can you kind of just talk a little bit about the general preparation adjustment thinking for the minor revisions and kind of how minor in scope those updates are?
Yeah, that's a valid question as well. I mean, going through the change from the minor revision perspective, to be honest, is not a big deal when it comes to the preparation phase, right? Because what you need to do is you need to take the old blueprint, the new blueprint, make a differentiation, compare them, and you will see which parts got removed, which parts were added. And obviously, you need to adjust and modify your learning path with the topics that you identify as the new topics. And we did it during this webinar, so I hope the effort is going to be minimized because of that webinar, because basically you need to update your knowledge about some specific versions of this I mean, which features and which functionalities were added in the specific versions of the software that we introduced. And basically, the biggest part is, Nexus Dashboard Insights with the services running on top, and potentially the Terraform as well that has been added. And obviously, just abandon and do not invest any more time in the topics which were basically removed from the blueprint. That's the let's say optimal plan an optimal answer for that question.
And I know for the non-lab exams, a couple of the program managers have recently been talking about, even the kind of the expected number of new questions related to the new topics being very minimal as we kind of gradually phase in the topics into the actual exams and think about how early should we put 20 new questions versus 1 or 2 new questions for the new exam topics, right? So, and they've basically emphasized that, for the first kind of wave of implementing the updated topics, the scope and the volume of the new questions will be pretty minimal, and that if you're well prepared for version 1, you're going to be fine with version 1.1 based on the number of questions that'll make their way into the exams that roughly speaking, right? Is that logic fair to say for the IE lab exams as well, or is the impact of the new topics a little bit larger when you think about the lab exams?
I would say the structure of the CCIE exam is totally different than the exam of the structures of the NP level exams. That's why I'm not gonna make such firm statements.
Yeah.
But obviously, when it comes to the changes, if you are going to try to quantify those changes, it's below 20%. It's below 20%. And
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
what I can firmly state. But yeah, if we do the changes because we need to do just to catch up with the market trends, with the industry, right? So do expect
Yep.
changes in the lab exam as well.
Yep. No, I think thank you, Jacob. That's very fair to say. And I knew that'd be, a bit of a tough question to answer. So thank you. And I think it's important, again, to just refocus folks on understanding the exam topics and what the verbs in the exam topics say. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct indeed.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Let me take a look here. Tanner, did any more? Oh, actually, I got a couple more good questions for you, Jacob. A couple kind of specific technology related questions. So also Brian asked if you'd be able to state what version of VMware vSphere VDS is the lab exam using?
Yeah, this is going to be version 7.0.
Cool. Perfect. Thank you. 7.0. Let's see. Then also, Halil wants to know for VXLAN EVPN from NX CLI or from NDFC?
That's a good question. So VXLAN EVPN is on the blueprint. NXOS standalone is on the blueprint, and NDFC is in the blueprint as well, which means that it can be this or that. It can be a combination. It can be whichever solution out of these provided here. So yes, do expect these combinations that can be built upon the blueprint alongside with the exam with the hardware and software list. So CLI based and the potentially NDFC based as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jacob. And then we do have a few more questions coming in written form. And I think in looking at the clock, it'll probably be good to tackle those in written form back instead of trying to tackle them verbally here. So I think, Tanner, we could probably go ahead and wrap up the verbal portion. And then just so everybody knows, we'll keep the WebEx open for a bit and continue to work through addressing some of the open questions in written form, given them Jacob's time.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. And do want to give Jacob one more opportunity. Jacob, is there anything else that you would like to touch on before we do wrap up here?
No, I think we're good. Just thanks for joining and thanks for valid questions. Obviously, I'm going to follow up on the community if there are any unanswered questions related to the CCIE Data Center version 3.1.
Great. Thanks so much, Jacob. Want to thank you. Want to thank Eric, Rigo, Matt, all our panelists and the whole team for bringing your knowledge to the Cisco community today. As Matt mentioned, if you do have a question, we'll keep that Q&A window open for a couple more moments to answer any additional questions. For even more tutorials, demonstrations, and future webinars, please visit the Cisco Learning Network. I'll place a link in the chat screen momentarily. It usually takes about 5 business days for today's session to be uploaded to the learning plan on the Cisco Learning Network. However, with the live stream on YouTube, the playback for this session will be available for you to watch at any time. You can also follow up with any further questions on the post-webinar discussion post on the Cisco Learning Network. I'll share a link to that in the chat screen once again. Your feedback is important to us, and at this time, you'll be directed to a survey. Please take the time to participate in that. It helps us plan out some future sessions. Once again, we thank everybody for joining us today, and we will see you next time on the Cisco Learning Network.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Jacob.